Michael will introduce our speaker today.
Yeah, it's my honor to introduce Dr. Bárbara Goettsch. Barbara has more than 20 years of experience in plant conservation with a special focus on Mexican Cactaceae. She holds a degree in biology from the National Autonomous University of Mexico and a PhD in conservation biology from the University of Sheffield, UK. Her career has combined fieldwork, research, and leadership roles. She has led numerous expeditions across Mexico's dry lands, contributed extensively to cactus taxonomy, and served as curator of the Cactaceae collection at the National Herbarium, as well as a database on North and Central American Cactaceae. Her research on cactus diversity patterns has provided key insights into beta diversity and community similarity in the Chihuahuan Desert. Barbara has also held important conservation leadership positions, including chief of the Department of Species at Risk of Extinction at Mexico's National Institute of Ecology and Climate Change. In that role, she managed Mexico's national list of species at risk, represented Mexico in CITES negotiations, and coordinated national research initiatives. She spearheaded the landmark Global Cactus Assessment, the first worldwide conservation assessment of an entire major plant group using IUCN Red List categories and criteria, organizing funding, research, and international expert workshops across the Americas and Europe. Since 2003, Barbara has been an active member of the IUCN SSC Cactus and Succulent Plant Specialist Group, where she now serves as co-chair, in addition to her role on the IUCN SSC Plant Conservation Committee. She also spent nearly a decade with the IUCN Red List unit in Cambridge, UK, as program officer of the Plants for People initiative. Today, Barbara continues her conservation work as an independent consultant and researcher, collaborating globally to protect cactus diversity and the ecosystems they support. So it's been a few decades since conservation biology has really become recognized as a science. However, to be an effective conservation biologist, you can't just be a scientist. You need to be able to translate science into on-the-ground conservation outcomes and policy changes, and that requires a very unique skill set, which is very rare. And Barbara exemplifies that very unique skill set. So I've known her for about 8 years now. I just looked it up earlier, and there's a lot to learn from her. So take it away, Barbara.
Barbara, you're muted.
Yes. Hi. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for the introduction, Mitch. That was very kind of you to say. So I would like, before I start sharing my screen, I would like to thank the CSSA for giving me the opportunity to give this presentation today. Thanks everyone as well for showing up on a Saturday morning. I hope all of you have had plenty of coffee, or if not, you're very welcome to sip as I go along. But anyway, it's a great pleasure to be here today, because I do not often get the opportunity to speak to societies. So I really hope that you find my presentation insightful and that you get a better idea of what we do in the IUCN Cactus and Succulent Plant Specialist Group. So I don't know if you've read the summary of my presentation. Can you see that on presenter's mode now, or not?
No, it's on the, yes, now it is.
Perfect. So I am here today as speaking in representation of the Cactus and Succulent Plant Specialist Group of the IUCN Species Survival Commission. And I'm obviously going to be talking about cactus conservation at the global level, because that's at the scope that we operate. And I'm going to give a few examples of what we do and how we do it. So the title of my talk today is Global Conservation of Cacti, Challenges and Opportunities. First of all, I would like to start this presentation by talking about our beloved plants. And I'm sure you know all of these facts, but don't we all love listening or hearing for the amazing facts that make these plants so unique. So as we all know, almost the whole family is endemic to the Americas, with the exception of one species. They are naturally distributed from southern Canada. You can see that on this map, southern Canada, all the way to Patagonia. And they occur in all kinds of environments, mainly in arid lands, but we can also find them in temperate forests here in Mexico, humid forests like the Mata Atlántica in Brazil, and everything in between. According to the last taxonomic treatment, there's close to 1,800 species. And as you all know, they have incredible adaptations to aridity. Most of the species lack leaves, which make them quite different from the rest of plants. And they present succulent stems, which is different from other succulent plants that can present succulent leaves. Most of the species have spines, not all of them, but most of them. And what makes the family quite unique is that they present areoles as growth meristems, which are the little dots that we see all around our plants. And that makes them different from any other plant family, or is the only plant family that has this characteristic. And last but not least, they present a very different photosynthetic cycle, which is known as CAM metabolism, or crassulation acid metabolism, that what basically does is the plants open their stomata or their little pores in the evenings to avoid desiccation during the day, because they grow in these such harsh environments. As we know, they come in all shapes and sizes, from massive plants more than 5 meters tall, to tiny things like the Blossfeldia in Argentina that are not bigger than the tip of a thumb. They play quite important roles in arid lands as sources of shelter, of food in the shape of fruits or nectar for many species, and also in providing microhabitats for many other species of animals and plants that live in these environments. As you can see from the pictures, is not only for vertebrates, but for a wide diversity of invertebrates as well. Another characteristic that makes them quite unique is that within the countries of origin, this plant family is highly utilized. It is estimated that around 57% of the known species, around 841 species, are utilized in one way or another. They are important sources of food. Like here in Mexico, we eat nopales, the stems of opuntias, which are very nutritious and delicious. But many of the fruits of many species are consumed by humans. In many areas, they are used for fodder, for cattle and goats, etc. And they are widely used as ornamental items. So around 674 species are known to be used for ornamental purposes. And these are just some examples of the things cactus or cacti are used for. So I'm gonna start talking about the conservation challenges that we find within the cactus family. So some of what I just described, the facts that they are quite popular and utilized, etc., makes them also quite tricky to conserve. To start with, around 31% of cacti are threatened with extinction. And this plant family is more threatened than birds or mammals worldwide. So in this comparative graph that I'm showing here in the slide, you can see that when the whole family was assessed back in 2013, cacti turned out to be the 6th taxonomic group evaluated for the IUCN Red List, with the highest level of number of species threatened with extinction. And on the right, you can see a map of the hotspots of threatened species distributed throughout the Americas. So basically 1/3 of the described or known species back in 2013 were threatened with extinction. So it makes it quite tricky to plan conservation and to act when you have close to 500 species threatened. That's one of our main challenges. But now I would like to talk a little bit more about how do we know that 31% of cacti are threatened with extinction. So I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation that I am the co-chair of the IUCN Species Survival Commission, Cactus and Succulent Plant Specialist Group. And among many other things that we do, we input into the red list of threatened species. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. So unfortunately, and historically, I don't know why, IUCN does not have a lot of presence in the US, even though there's a regional office in the US in Washington. But there's not a lot of presence. So just so that you have an idea of what the red list is, I'm sure most of you have heard of it, but if you haven't, it's something equivalent to the US Endangered Species Act of 1973, which lists the US species that are threatened with extinction. So the IUCN red list does the same, but at the global level. However, one of the main differences is that the ESA has legal weight, while the IUCN Red List doesn't. You know, it depends on each country if they want to adopt it as a legal instrument or not. So just in case you have not heard about what the Red List is, I'm going to talk a little bit about it. So the Red List is the world's most comprehensive information source for extinction risk of species. So basically, we assess how likely a species is to go extinct based on a series of factors. So the Red List is not just a list, it's actually a very detailed database on the conservation status at the global level for species. They assess everything and anything, you know, from fungi to elephants, every single species, with the exception of microorganisms. So the Red List is based on the best scientific information available and is widely used to influence biodiversity conservation around the world. All their information is publicly available on the IUCN Red List webpage. I invite you to have a look if you want to understand a little bit more about the Red List. So this massive database includes information on the species threats, ecological requirements, conservation actions needed and in place. And as I said before, these assessments are developed by experts around the world. And it actually works as an online scientific journal, and it's updated at least twice a year. And to assess the extinction risk of species, we follow a very well-established methodology, which is called the IUCN Red List Categories and Criteria. It's quite robust, and it has been tested, you know, really well tested, and is really well thought. And yeah, the last revision was done in the year 2000. But basically, this methodology allows you to assess how likely a species is to go extinct. And I can talk about the red list categories and criteria for a very long time, but I don't want to bore you with that. But I just wanted you to have like a general idea of what it is. So who puts the IUCN red list together, or you might be wondering also, like, who is the IUCN? So the IUCN, the International Union for Conservation of Nature, is the world's largest and oldest conservation organization. It has its headquarters in Switzerland, and it was created back in 1948 when a group of people started realizing that like the massive declines in certain species, and they wanted to do something about it. So the union was created, and it's basically composed by different sections. I'm not going to go into detail about this either, but the message I want you to take out from this slide is that the two main components working on species conservation in IUCN are, on one side, the Secretariat, which holds, for example, the Red List Unit, and the Red List Unit is in charge of keeping the high standard and quality of the Red List, among many other things, and the Species Survival Commission, which is, the IUCN has 7 commissions, and the Species Survival Commission, or SSE, is the largest one, with more than 10,000 experts that volunteer their time to work towards the conservation of species worldwide. So this is an example of some of the logos of the different specialist groups that conform the Species Survival Commission. There's over 160 specialist groups, 45 of them specialist groups and task forces. So 45 of them, maybe more, are focused on plants. So the cactus and succulent plant specialist group is one of 45. And so far now we have 54 members from 15 countries, and our number keeps increasing. Yeah, so that was just to give you a little bit of an idea of how we generate all this information, about the threats of the species and how we can focus conservation efforts, because the rest of my presentation is going to be touching on those as well. So for the specific case of cacti, I want to talk about a little bit on how we managed to assess the close to 1,500 species for the IUCN Red List. So back in 2008, a massive effort, it was a project that I had the privilege of managing as a postdoc, when I finished my PhD, as a postdoc project. So it was called the Global Cactus Assessment, and we had the aim to assess the extinction risk of all known species. Then what we followed was the cactus lexicon, which was written by Hunt and Nigel Taylor and Charles. I forgot his name. It'll come to me. There's 3 authors of the cactus lexicon. So we basically, following the IUCN categories and criteria, we assess all known species. We brought together more than 70 experts, not only from academia, but also from societies, a lot of hobbyists and conservation institutions, governmental organizations, etc. And in the process, one of the main outputs of this work was the generation of distribution maps for all the species. So we gathered databases from different places and accumulated around over 75,000 records. And the maps are really important because, to conserve a species, you need to know where it occurs so that you can actually do conservation on the ground. And as a result of this massive effort that lasted around 4 years, a high impact paper came out in a very well-renowned journal, Nature Plant, that has been widely used by many people working with these plants. And it obviously also recognized the effort of all the experts that participated in the process. So there was a lot of collaboration from institutions that supported the process, not only with time from their staff, but also with funding for the workshops and to process the data. And as you can see in this slide, back then, the CSSA funded and participated in some of our workshops. So from this study, as I mentioned, the red list also looks into what threatens species in the wild. And so this is another of the challenges that we have when we look at conserving this plant group. There's so many different threats affecting them in so many different geographic areas. So, it's not just one thing that you have to be dealing with, like trying to mitigate, but it's a massive diversity of things, like from shrimp farms in the Sonoran Desert, in Sonora, here in Mexico, to paper factories down in Uruguay, that plant eucalyptus, and the eucalyptus litter is what provides it covers the plants and the plants end up dying. So, it's a massive diversity and array of threats. But, when you look at the drivers, or when we analyze the drivers or the ultimate threat contributing or enabling the extinction risk of cacti, gathering plants came up as the most frequent one, with 47% of threatened cacti being affected by unscrupulous collection. And this kind of collection can take many different shapes, like from people in countries where plants are legally collected. You need permits to collect them. I think it's the same for the US. I am not sure if that happens in all states, but for example, here in Mexico, we have our own national list, and if a species is there, you cannot collect it. So from people gathering plants from the field to locals, and even people coming from outside Mexico to export them to other countries. And unfortunately, until this day, it still remains a massive issue: illegal trade and unethical collection. Here I'm showing some pictures. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but these are some Ariocarpus that were confiscated and now look by the botanical garden in the National University in Mexico City. And as you can see, these are quite old plants. We're talking about specimens between 100 to 200 years. These are another confiscation held by the garden, Lophophoras of a pretty good size. And we also had this, the really well-known case of the 1,000 specimens of Copiapoa confiscated in Italy. And the picture that you can see it's top right of the screen, it's 2,000 Chilean cacti, mainly copiapoas, that were confiscated here in Mexico in July. So this, couple of months ago. So this is still happening widely, and it's a very complex threat to deal with, because it's related to poverty in local communities, to networks that operate really in a similar way to cartels and for drugs and guns, and this all happens underground, obviously, and it's really difficult to get numbers. And what we see in these pictures is only probably the tip of the iceberg. And according to a recent paper from Pablo Guerrero in Chile and collaborators, they assess the effect of trade and poaching on copiapoa. And yes, it is one of the main threats for this genus in Chile still. So why is poaching, or how does poaching affect wild populations? So the issue is that, as you probably know, cacti have very low recruitment of individuals in their populations. So, it takes a long time for a cactus to reach maturity to be able to reproduce, and for the population to recruit baby cacti. And they're really long-lived species, so when we take out from the field a 300-year individual, it's going to take that time to replace it, right? So poaching has massive effects on the population, ecology, and biology of species in the field. And obviously, this is not an issue. Well, the picture that you can see here is from confiscation done in the US from Ariocarpus cochuveyanus, that is kept in desert botanical gardens. So they're basically trying to help the specimen survive. But as you can see, it's lots of plants, each pot has around 10 individuals. And this issue is not it doesn't only happen in cacti, it also happens in succulents in South Africa. Like the numbers I included in the slide in the bottom, is since 2019, over 1 million plants have been extracted from the wild, representing around 6,000 species of the succulent karoo. And this is the number of confiscated plants, like illegal trade. When plants are confiscated, it also has a massive pressure on the gardens that look after them. And sadly, in South Africa, at least 9 species have gone ecologically extinct because of poaching in the last 5 years. So it's a very complex issue to deal with, and it's very real, that affects our plants. Another massive threat, which is quite, relatively new. We knew it was having an effect on the plants, but we didn't know for real when we assessed them for the first time. But recent studies, like the study that was led by Mitch Pillet in 2022, an excellent study that looked into models of climate change and how they affect the range of species. And, it is quite clear that their extinction risk is going to go up as climate change, as the climate gets hotter. So in this cartoon that I put here, this is an example of a species, a bird species that it's like occupies the habitat of high mountains, and what happens, is one of the most well-known cases, all these species that are at the top of the ranges in mountaintops, they don't have anywhere else to migrate, right? So as that happens, as the temperature goes up, the red list category, you know, the risk of extinction or the probability of extinction also goes up. So what happens in cacti is that they really are at the limit of their tolerance in these already really dry and harsh environments. And if that gets worse, you know, they won't be able to tolerate that. And just to exemplify how that is changing now that we have reassessed some species like the genus Copiapoa, that this table corresponds to all species of the genus Copiapoa, which we assessed back in 2013. We reassessed it 10 years later, and now 92% of the species are threatened, you know, compared to 55 back in 2013. And climate change is another threat that it's really difficult to tackle, right? Because we still haven't worked out, other than ex situ conservation, what can we be doing on the ground to prevent extinction. So moving to other challenges about conserving these plants is that, as you probably know, a lot of them have very small distribution ranges. So when you want to protect them, it's very tricky to think about a way of doing this without having to conserve massive areas, right? So just so you have an idea, from the same spatial data that was generated for the global cactus assessment, then we assess how many of the species were within protected areas and how well protected threatened species were. So it turned out that 80% of all cacti were outside protected areas globally. However, 32% of threatened cacti were not in protected areas. So we still have a massive task there. And some, you know, like 60 critically endangered. So the critically endangered species are those that have really small distribution ranges and are known from one population only. So 60 of those are not in protected areas either. Most of those species are in Mexico, Brazil, and Peru. So we have a massive challenge, but at least we now have the information to start acting. So after having a little bit of maybe like a gloom view of the challenges for conservation, I would like to move on to the opportunities that working with this amazing plant family brings. So first of all, you know, there's a lot of expertise, as we show, as I was showing you in the picture from the global cactus assessment. You know, like so many experts came together. You know, so it's quite a well-known plant family compared to many others. So, and there's a lot of people doing field work. So we have enough information to assess them and to act on what we need to do. This picture on the top from a Zoom meeting, that was from the Conservation Action Planning for Copiapoa. And as you can see, you know, it's we're talking about around 47 species, and there were so many experts. Sorry, I changed the slide. So as you can see from the bottom bit of the slide that has all the logos, we had a lot of organizations from government, academia, zoos in the UK, Chester Zoo, it's a massive partner for this, came together to work out this plan. Same as the experience we had with the global cactus assessment, you know, we got the support and funding to run the assessment. which helps. Like fundraising is always difficult, but it's easier than for other groups that are not as charismatic as cacti. And in many countries, they are iconic elements of their landscapes. So that also helps, So working with a charismatic and well-known, by the general public group of plants makes or can make things easier for us. So that's just to continue that idea, about the opportunities that we had. This conservation action plan for Copiapoa is the first one that the specialist group has developed so far. I'm really hoping that it's the first of many. It was published this year, but we started the process 4 years ago. And again, it's an example of when collaboration happens, what can be achieved. And we are in the process of implementing it. I am not going to talk into the details yet, but I can tell you that it's going really well. So to get the buy-in of people when you work with these iconic plants, it can make things easier. So you might be asking yourselves now, so what can societies do, right? Societies like the Cactus and Succulent Society of America. So according to recent publications, Margulies 2022 and Jordan 2020, not 2021. There's around 441 collector society around the world, and this number might be larger. There's not a database that keeps track of the number of societies, but there's a lot of them. And even though we know, because of these publications, that there's still conflict within societies about engaging or not in illegal trade, most of them have had in the last years a massive shift moving towards conservation. And I would like to share with you something that really inspired me. Last week or 2 weeks ago, someone wrote to me saying like, oh, I'm really interested. I am from the New York Cactus and Succulent Society. I'm really interested in learning more about poaching and illegal trade. Would you talk to me? And I said, yes, of course. And I was expecting, someone, sorry, I moved my slides and I shouldn't have done that. Someone way older. But to my surprise, it was quite a young lad, and I was surprised. I was just like, oh my God, I wasn't expecting that. Like, how old are you? And he said, oh, I'm 27. So I think there's a real shift. There's a lot of the younger generation started to be interested in the plants, and they are also really concerned about doing the right thing, not being related to poaching or illegal trade or anything like that. So I really see societies as a massive opportunity to collaborate and work together towards the conservation of these plants that we love and admire so much. Societies have a lot of expertise. They can play a massive role about raising awareness on the importance of these plants, and also about the issues we have on illegal trade. From our past experience, they have been really good partners in funding the activities that focus more on conservation do. The Conservation Action Plan for Copiapoa was partly funded by the British Cactus and Succulent Society. And their members, they also have provided a lot of data from their own field expeditions for us to include in the assessments and in the mapping process and all that. So I think societies can be a wealth of resources of different kind to enhance our conservation work. So what is the Cactus and Succulent Plant Specialist Group focusing on? So 10 years have passed since we assessed the family, and now we have to reassess it. And as you probably know, since the last revision, we have many more species, newly described species, but also a lot of species that have been split and now recognized as good species. So back when we did the global assessment, we had 1,479, not 80 species according to Hunt, and now we have almost we have 1,851 species. So we have around 400 more to assess. And there's not only been taxonomic changes, but obviously with global change, there's a lot happening, like land use change, a lot of these species, that's another massive threat, like habitat conversion for agriculture, etc. So we are reassessing the family. Again, we have already started the process. And this time around, we are going to be focusing as well as a like a follow-up process from the assessment, then go straight into the conservation planning of those species that need it the most, to really focus on conservation on the ground. The other thing that we do actively and constantly is find the funds to carry out our work. As I mentioned before, our time as experts is it's a volunteer, but we still need to plan workshops, process data, etc. So if you have been inspired by the work we do, donations are welcome. Our host institution, Desert Botanical Gardens, manage our funds, but you can get in touch with me directly. There's my email. So last but not least, the acknowledgements. Our host institution would allows us to have a program officer that helps us with our everyday jobs. My co-chair, Lucas Major, Red List Authority, Raul Puente, Mitch, who was our program officer for 2 years, maybe 3. Sorry, Mitch, I lost the count, but he did an amazing job, and we're still using all the information and things that he helped us set up. And obviously our donors and partners in different parts of the world. So I would be very interested to know what you think you as a society can how you can help conservation. So I have nothing else to say, but thank you. And I did that in Spanish. I have 2 question marks, sorry. I would just like to say thank you, and feel free to get in touch with me if you have any questions or would like a chat or anything. Thank you so much for listening.